Hey everybody, welcome back to The Brave and the Boys with your host Jordan. And in honor of the new Netflix anime adaptation of Scott Pilgrim, I'm going to be taking a look at Volume 1, Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life. Let's roll that intro.
Deep within a bleak and dismal swamp, hidden beneath its murky waters, lies the headquarters of the most sinister villains of all time, the Legion of Doom.
The comic book series Scott Pilgrim is both written and illustrated by Brian Lee O'Malley. This series did come out back in 2004 through 2010 in these digest-sized volumes, which did initially come out in black and white, as seen here. You may have heard of this series from the cult classic movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, or maybe even the video game adaptation of that goes by the same name. Which, fun fact actually, the series isn't called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, it's just called Scott Pilgrim, but the title actually comes from Volume 2, which is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Although each book has its own subtitle. For instance, we also have Scott Pilgrim vs. the Universe, which, hey, that's a lot bigger space in the world. With the new Netflix adaptation of the comic coming out later this month, it reinvigorated me into rereading this series, which, as stated, the copies that I have are the black and white Fourth Estate printings, which are the European versions of the book. I didn't get the US versions because when I was trying to buy the hardcover US versions, those were out of print at the time. They have come back, and here's a clip of me finding that at my local comic book shop, which past me would have jumped on immediately, but his loss. If you are a fan of the series, or if you only read comics in color, like Jake, you can pre-order the new slipcase printing of Scott Pilgrim from our friends over at Organic Price Books. This set comes with all 6 hardcovers that are fully colored and with a cool slipcase for them to all go into. And remember, when you're purchasing from Organic Price Books, use code Braveboys in order to save $2 off of your order, or Braveboyssit when buying 4 or more books to save 5% off of your entire order. Alright, enough with the promotions. Let's get into Volume 1, Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life. From the opening pages, you can see the charm and unique art style of Brian Lee O'Malley. It's simplistic, yet he doesn't skip out on the background detail. Each one of his character designs is unique on its own and is easily distinguishable from each other. I'm glad that they're keeping the same type of art style for the Netflix adaptation, although they are adding a little bit more manga-inspired art into it, which I'm okay with because the entire series was inspired from manga. These books are broken up into chapters, with chapter 1 being Dating a High Schooler, which sounds exactly what it is. Our book opens up with Scott's friends, bandmates actually, finding out that 23-year-old Scott Pilgrim is now dating 17-year-old high schooler Knives. Knives is a nice but impressionable teen who's broadening her horizons by dating Scott Pilgrim. For instance, she doesn't listen to much music, so when she watches Scott's band practice for the first time, she immediately becomes their biggest fan. Sorry, young Neil. The main conundrum of the first volume is that Scott is currently dating Knives, but keeps having these reoccurring dreams about this girl that rollerblades throughout his mindscape? Landscape? So, when he finally meets the literal girl of his dreams, he can't help but ask her out. Scott has an awkward first encounter with the girl of his dreams, Ramona Flowers to give her a name, at a friend's party. Scott then stalks Ramona for the rest of the party and does some recon by asking his friends about her. This leads him to finding out that Ramona works as a delivery person for Amazon Canada. Keep in mind, this was released back in 2004 when Amazon mostly sold books and CDs, and they're not the trillion-dollar conglomerate that they are now. When Scott finds out that Ramona works for Amazon, he orders some CDs, hoping that his delivery person would be Ramona, which, for the plot's sake, it is. It's here when we get our first glimpse that this book isn't truly written in reality. You see, the reason Scott kept dreaming about Ramona is because Ramona's from the US, and in the US, people can use this dream subspace, which allows them to move miles a second. But this technology doesn't exist in Canada, obviously. It's around this time that Scott receives an email and a letter from this mysterious guy named Matthew. Too bad for Scott, he doesn't have the patience to read them. I wonder if this will come up later in the book. Scott and Ramona then go on a date to a park where, oh no, a snowstorm hits. This is one of my favorite examples of abstract reality being portrayed within a comic panel. As it snows more and more, less of the panel is drawn to portray the ongoing storm. Then flip to the next page and everything has been inverted, and Ramona is literally pulling Scott out of the snow void into the only thing visible, her house door. Now, I realize I skipped over one of the first fourth wall breaks within this series. When Ramona asks Scott about his previous job, he states, "Maybe we can get into it in a later volume." I should state that this theory does a great job of not taking itself too seriously, yet still composing a narrative that's easy to follow, even with fourth wall breaks or referring to its own material. Okay, back to Ramona's house. Both Scott and Ramona are drenched from the storm, and they end up sleeping together. No, not that kind. Literal sleeping together. My man Scott here is just trying to find love. It's been a whole year since he's had a girlfriend, which he started dating Knives at the beginning of this book, but seems like Ramona's more his speed. The next morning, Scott then asked Ramona to come to his gig that he has next Wednesday, but Knives has already been invited by Scott to go see the same gig. This leads to
Wallace Wells.
Scott's gay roommate, who is actually one of the funniest characters of the book, telling Scott that he has to break up with Knives. When the time comes for Scott to break up with her, he just doesn't have the heart to do it and gets away in a rush. Man, what is gonna happen at Scott's gig? Knives and her friend show up at the gig, and Knives kisses Scott right before Ramona walks in. Scott rushes backstage with the band where they discuss the current band on stage, Crash and the Boys. And yes, that girl is a boy. The final song by Crash and the Boys knocks out the audience. Ramona and Scott's sister bumped into each other in the bathroom and end up finding out that they have a mutual connection. When they leave the bathroom, they see the audience of unconscious people. Sex Bomb, Scott's band, gets on stage to start playing. That's when, out of nowhere, Matthew Patel breaks through the roof and fights Scott Pilgrim. Unluckily for Matthew, Scott is actually one of the best fighters in town, and with the powers of friendship, Scott defeats Matthew. When Matthew is defeated, he turns into a pile of coins, like in a video game. Scott takes Ramona by the hand and they run out of the gig and hop on a bus. This is where it's explained that in order for Scott to continue to date Ramona, he's going to have to defeat all of 7 of her evil ex-boyfriends. And that wraps up Volume 1 of Scott Pilgrim. If you can't tell by now, I'm a huge Scott Pilgrim fan. Ever since I saw the movie adaptation with Michael Cera, I wanted to read the source material for it, and reading the material, it just adds more context and more plot to the story. It's a little bit bigger than what the movie portrays it as, and it's so much fun. I truly loved reading this comic and getting to reread it again, and I am extremely excited for the Netflix adaptation of it. I know I went over the plot, emphasizing more of the story elements of the book, but it's more than just that. What makes this book great is not only the small subtleties of the detail put into the art, but the dialogue between the characters. It's natural, and it allows to show each character's persona. And mixing these big personas with these big, bombastic fight scenes just makes it that much better. It's basically a recipe for success, and this is honestly one of my favorite series to read and reread again. Now, I do gotta say, Brian Lee O'Malley does have more books besides Scott Pilgrim. My good friend Paul Brian Fernando, which he's been on this channel before, which you could check out that video if you ever want to watch it, has been recommending Seconds by Brian Lee O'Malley, and that might be a read that I do later this year. So if you're interested in something like that, let me know down below. Now, I want to hear your experience with Scott Pilgrim. Have you seen the movie, played the video game, read the books? Have you done none and you're going to watch the Netflix series fresh? If you are, I want to hear about it. Let me know down below in the comments. And as always, please like this video, subscribe if you want more content like this. Don't forget to check out our channel sponsor, Organic Price Books. I'll go over it one more time. You can use our code Braveboys to save $2 off your purchase, or Braveboyssit to save 5% when buying 4 or more books. Alright guys, that's going to wrap it up for me today. As always, keep reading and stay bold. See ya.